right, welcome back. We're getting ready to do part 2 of the series, Israel, the Northern Kingdom's Captivity. We're getting ready to get into the Book of Judith, because this goes into the captivity of Israel under the Assyrians. Now, as I said before, you can find this book in the Douay-Rheims. If you go to the Bible Gateway, change it from KJV to Douay-Rheims, and you can get this, because this was in 1899 American edition, but it was originally the manuscripts that was in the original Bible. I think they said I can't remember which group, but one of the groups has decided to take that book out. And as you read this, you're going to understand why, because it talks about a lot of the deeds and going against second guessing the Father, and you're not supposed to do any of that. And it goes into the other nations, which people are trying to bring into the kingdom, saying that this is Israel. No, it's not Israel. But it also goes into what the other nations know about how to spoil Israel, because we're going to read it from the Bible, and then we already read it from the Bible, but we're going to read it also in the Book of Judith. I'm nowhere near done with this, but I'm going to try to keep this nice and sweet and short. Let's begin. This is the Book of Judith out of Douay-Rheims, 1899 American edition. The word Judith means Jewess or praised. Now, chapter 1 in the Book of Judith. Now, Arphaxad, king of the Medes, had brought many nations under his dominions, and he built a very strong city, which he called Ecbatana, of stones squared and hewed, and he made the walls thereof 70 cubits broad, and 30 cubits high, and the towers thereof he made 100 cubits high. But on the square of them, each side was extended the space of 20 feet. And he made the gates thereof according to the height of the towers. And he gloried as a mighty one in the force of his army and in the glory of his chariots. Now in the 12th year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, who reigned in Nineveh, the great city, fought against Arphaxad and overcame him. I'm going to stop there for a second. When you go look up that, it says Nineveh, the great city. Well, all you got to do is go to Jonah chapter 3, and you're going to read about Nineveh, the great city. So this is giving you some understanding that if he was reigning, and it was supposed to be a very wicked place, this is why Jonah didn't want to go to talk to those of his people who were scattered from the Tower of Babel, who were living in that area. Why he didn't want to go to them? You're going to read their characteristics and their traits. But this was that city that Jonah had to go visit. So it says, I'm going to read it again. Verse 5. Now in the 12th year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, who reigned in Nineveh, the great city, fought against Arphaxad and overcame him. In the great plain which is called Ragu, about the Euphrates and the Tigris and the Jadason, in the plain of Arioch, the king of the Elysians. Then was the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar exalted, and his heart was elevated. And he sent to all that dwelt in Cilicia and Damascus and Libanias, and to the nations that are in Carmelos and Cedar, and to the inhabitants of Galilee in the great plain of Ashkelon, and to all that were in Samaria. That's why I had to go read to you about those who were in Samaria that the Father said, you're getting ready to get captured by the Assyrians. So we're talking about the northern kingdom here. And all to those who were in Samaria and beyond the river Jordan, even to Jerusalem, and all the land of Jesse, till you come to the borders of Ethiopia. To all these Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, sent messengers, But they all with one mind refused, and sent them back empty, and rejected them without honor. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, being angry against all that land, swore by his throne and kingdom that he would revenge himself of all those countries. So we're getting ready to go into part 2. I'm going to, at the end of all this, I'm going to probably do a recap of simply why is it that you should get some understanding from these books? Why did they remove these books? Me just reading it, you should catch it. But if you don't, the very last lesson I do, I'm going to do a recap of everything and give you, okay, they said this, but where else did they say this? What do these other nations know? Because our Father says there's nothing new beneath the sun. So let's read chapter 2 of the Book of Judith. In the 13th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, the 22nd day of the first month, the word was given out in the house of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyrians, that he would revenge himself. And he called all the ancients and all the governors and his officers of war, and communicated to them the secret of his counsel. And he said that his thoughts were to bring all the earth under his empire. And when this saying pleased them all, Nebuchadnezzar the king called Holofernes, the general of his army. And he said to him, go out against all the kingdoms of the west, and against them especially that despise my commandment. Thy eye shall not spare any kingdom, and all the strong cities thou shalt bring under my yoke. Then Holofernes called the captains of the officers of the power of the Assyrians, and he mustered men for the expedition, as the king had commanded him, 120,000 fighting men on foot, and 12,000 archers, horsemen. And he made all his warlike preparations to go before with a multitude of innumerable camels, with all provisions, sufficient for the armies in abundance, and herds of oxen, and flocks of sheep without number. He appointed corn to be prepared out of all Syria in his passage, but gold and silver he took out of the king's house in great abundance. And he went forth, he and all the army, with the chariots and horsemen and archers, who covered the face of the earth like locusts. And when he had passed through the borders of the Assyrians, he came to the great mountain of Anj, which are on the left of Cilicia, and he went up to all their castles, and took all the strong places. And he took by assault the renowned city of Melothos, and pillaged all the children of Tharsaris, and the children of Ishmael, who were over against the face of the desert, and on the south of the land of Ceylon. And he passed over the Euphrates, and came into Mesopotamia. And he forced all the stately cities that were there, from the torrent of Mamre till one comes to the sea. And he took the borders thereof from Cilicia to the coast of Japheth, which are towards the south. And he carried away all the children of Madian, and stripped them of all their riches, and all that resisted him he slew with the edge of the sword. And after these things he went down into the plains of Damascus in the days of the harvest, and he set all the corn on fire, and he caused all the trees and vineyards to be cut down. And the fear of them fell upon Alit, the inhabitants, or excuse me, that is Alit, the inhabitants of the land. So he's conquering. By the time you get to Judith chapter 3, it reads, then the kings and the princes and all the cities and provinces of Syria, Mesopotamia, Syria, Sobal, Libya, Cilicia, sent their ambassadors, who coming to Holofernes said, "Let thy indignation towards us cease, for it is better for us to live and serve Nebuchadnezzar the great king, and be subject to thee, than to die and to perish or suffer the misery of slavery. All our cities, our possessions, all mountains and hills and fields and herds of oxen and flocks of sheep and goats and horses and camels and all our goods and families are in thy sight. Let all we have be subject to thy law. Both we and our children are thy servants. Come to us a peaceable Lord, and use our service as it pleases thee well." Then he came down from the mountain with horsemen in great power, and made himself mastery of every city and all the inhabitants of the land. And from all the cities he took auxiliary valiant men and chosen for war. So he's taking people to muster up to make his army bigger. And so great a fear lay upon all those provinces that the inhabitants of all the cities, both princes and nobles, as well as the people, went out to meet him at his coming, and received him with garland, lights, and dances, and timbrels, and flutes. And they did these things. They could not for all that magistrate the fierceness of his heart. For he had both destroyed the cities and cut down their groves. For Nebuchadnezzar, the king, had commanded him to destroy all the gods of the earth, that he only might be called God by those nations, which could be brought under him by the power of Holofernes, his army, his soldier. And when he had passed through all Syria, Sobal, and all Epimia, and all of Mesopotamia, he came to the Idumeans into the lands of Gaba. And he took possession of their cities, and stayed there 30 days, in which days he commanded all the troops of his armies to unite. Judith chapter 4. Then the children of Israel, who dwelt in the land of Judah, heard these things, were exceedingly afraid of them. Dread and horror seized upon their minds, lest he should do the same to Jerusalem and to the temple of the Lord, that he had done to the other cities and their temples. And they sent into all Samaria round about, as far as Jericho, and seized upon all the tops of the mountains. And they compassed their towns with walls, and gathered together corn for provision for war. And Eliakim the priest wrote to all that were over against Esdraelon, which faces the great plain near Dothan, and to all by whom where might be a passage of way, that they should take possession of the ascents of the mountains. So they're supposed to go hide out in the mountains, by which there might be any way to Jerusalem, and should keep watch where they wait. And they, let me read this again. It says, and should keep watch where the way was narrow between the mountains. And the children of Israel did as the priest of the Lord Eliakim had appointed them. And all the people cried to the Lord with great earnestness. And they humbled their souls in fasting and prayer, both they and their wives. And the priests put on haircloths. And they caused the little children to lie prostrate before the temple of the Lord. And the altar of the Lord they covered with haircloth. And they cried to the Lord, the God of Israel, with one accord, that their children might not be made a prey, and their wives carried off, and their cities destroyed, and their holy things profaned, and that they might not be made a reproach to the Gentiles. So that's letting you know who these other nations are. They're Gentiles. The Father's not with them. It says, then Eliakim, the high priest of the Lord, went about all Israel and spoke unto them, saying, know ye the Lord will hear your prayers, if you continue with perseverance in fasting and prayers in the sight of the Lord. Remember Moses, the servant of the Lord, who overcame Amalek that trusted in his own strength, and in his power, and in his army, and in his shield, and in his chariots, and his horsemen, not by fighting with the sword, but by holy prayers. So shall all the enemies of Israel be, if you I can't say that word, perseverance in this work which you have begun. If you continue in this work which you have begun. So they, being moved by this exhortation of his, prayed to the Lord and continued in the sight of the Lord, so that even they who offered the holocaust to the Lord, offered the sacrifices to the Lord, girded with haircloths, and with ashes upon their heads. And they all begged of God with all their heart that he would visit his people Israel. Now I'm going to stop there. I read to you, let's see, I think I read, yeah. That was Judith 1 through 4. Next time we get together, I'm going to go deeper into the book. But I think I gave you enough today to really look at why they were in this condition. Why were the other armies able to even think to come against Israel? Because we're going to get into that within the story. But Isaiah had told you. He told you Ephraim went into idolatry. So that's just a hint. I'm not going to go too much further, family. I just got off work and I do need to get a little sleep. So with that said, I want to thank the Father for his Spirit that is giving us the understanding of his word, precepting this properly for us, getting us to understand what was so important in these books that they had to hide them, Father. Your word declares it within the Bible, but these books they removed just adds more spiritual wisdom to what we have already known. So, Father, we give you the glory. We give you the honor, and we say hallelujah in Yahushua's name. Deuces, I'm out.